Hi, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Millie's Bayside Chats, where we are live streaming to bring some calm to the chaos of your PCS. Every week, we interview DD Station experts to bring you the dish on PCSing to a place that you may or may not have heard of. So be sure to join us each and every week because we will be talking tips and trips and hacks and all sorts of other great gems along the way. So you'll want to pick up everything you can and just take a deep breath with us. It'll all be okay. My name is Kelly Artis. I am your host, and I am really glad you're here today. Oh, hey, Alicia. You jumped in early. Let's just go.
I didn't thought you were talking to me. I'm
No,
sorry.
you're so good. So you guys. All right. So my guest is super eager. We're going to go. All right. Ready? Hey, Alecia. This is Alecia Blair, you guys. She's joining us from Fort Bliss, Texas, and she is bringing the energy that I needed.
Well, I've had one cup of coffee this morning,
I have
so
not
we're
had
good. We're
any.
good.
I don't know how, but you know what? We're going to go with it because I love it. So today we are going to be chatting about Fort Bliss, Texas, a place that I have never been, and I know a teeny tiny bit about because of doing some research for our installation guides, which you guys can be found over on gomillie.com. So if you would like to follow along or, kind of help orient yourself visually as we're chatting, go ahead and pull up another window and look at the map over on the side. But today we're going to be chatting a couple of things about the area, and then we're also going to get into some of the other cool stuff that Alicia is doing because we met through another little venture. I got to do kind of the flip side of this. I got to be on the other side of a camera with a project that Alicia was working on, and we were talking about PCS tips for financial security, right?
Absolutely.
Okay, cool. So Alicia, go ahead and introduce yourself to everyone. Let everyone know kind of what's going on, what you've got going on there, and what your story has been so far in the military lifestyle.
Okay. Sure. So, good morning, everyone, or afternoon, depending on where you are. My name is Alecia Blair, and I am stationed right now at Fort Bliss, Texas. I'm here, obviously, with my husband, and we have two children and a silly golden retriever. We've been married now or it's coming up on 15 years, and we've been at this for just as long. So we've had I've lost track, Kelly. I think it's 9 or 10 PCS moves. Um, if you don't count the ones that we weren't together
So it gets
necessarily.
fuzzy, right? It's hard to count. So we do this fun game whenever we go places. We have
Yeah.
these little, I keep a roll of these little stickers. I know, y'all, don't cringe.
Yes.
But I
Oh my
keep rolls of
gosh.
these because a lot of times people have this really adverse reaction to
Yeah.
seeing them. It's almost like, ugh. We wanted to
Yes.
reframe it. So what we did was we handed out PCS rank, and we would ask people how many times we PCSed, and everybody would go, oh. Every single time they would look up and off to the right, like the number was hidden in a cloud up there somewhere. And then they're
Yeah.
counting. And then it was, does it count when I was a kid? Does it count, if it wasn't when we
That's
were
right.
married? Or, so anyway, our ruling was if you had to move, then it counts. Like,
Okay.
period.
I'm gonna go with 10
Ugh.
because I think the last time I checked it was 10. But it's been a crazy busy adventure. But we are here at Fort Bliss. I think we have maybe one or two more
Yep.
moves before my husband looks at retirement in 3.5, 4 years. So yeah, so we're here, and Fort Bliss is a beautiful location. It's very different from what I'm used to, and I had a little bit of anxiety about that prior to moving. But I'm happy to join you today and tell you about the area and anything else I can share.
Awesome. Okay, cool. Well, I'm going to pull a map up and let's see if we can share that as we talk. So let's see. Oh, it works. Yay.
Yay, look at
Let's
that.
see. Let me make sure I've got all my sound and everything. Okay, cool. All right. So this is what we kind of have on this is our main page, you guys, for Fort Bliss. So if you go to find a base up here at the top of gomillie.com, you'll get some, kind of cursory information about the area, a little bit about the climate, what to expect, sort of an overview. And then we've got this fun little map. So Alicia, go ahead and tell us. So let's pretend like I'm in a Facebook group and I'm saying, hey, I'm moving to Fort Bliss. Tell me everything. And then people
Yep,
just start throwing all these terms at me. And looks
sure.
like Fort Bliss is all directionally oriented. So what are we northeast and east of and central of? And what are the meaning of
Yeah.
all of that?
Yeah, so Fort Bliss kind of sits right in the middle of El Paso, pretty much in the middle. Um, and you can see it there in kind of the brown section. Then you kind of go, I guess you would say south, and that would be pretty much literally over the border is Juarez. It's a border town, and there's a long, rich culture. With Mexico and it's definitely a Spanish speaking culture, but it's been a wonderful environment to kind of throw our family into for this period of time. So again, you've got central El Paso, which is right there by the border. Kind of to the east of Fort Bliss is a whole kind of other section of El Paso. It's a huge area. I can't overemphasize that. It's a very large city, which is kind of unusual within the Army, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
I feel like we're always stationed in sort of these remote
Yep.
places where you have to drive 2 hours to get
Mm-hmm.
to an airport.
Right.
So one of the really fun things about this area is that there is a large airport here, that we have family that kind of gets in and out of. There aren't many direct flights to where our family is on the East Coast, but there is an airport,
That's awesome.
and that is right by Fort Bliss.
Mm-hmm.
So everything is centrally located. Then northeast of Fort Bliss is a whole other community of El Paso. That's actually where I live in the northeast. And then you have on the other side of the mountains, you have the west side. Right there is the mountain chain, and those are the Franklin Mountains. Very beautiful area to hike. One of the first things that we did when we got here was download an app called Visit El Paso. It's the
Hmm.
official sort of app for El Paso for entertainment and hiking trails and that sort of thing. And we downloaded that and we started going through the list of things that Visit El Paso said to do. And one of the first things we did was go on one of the hiking trails here. It's called the 10-mile hike. And it's a nice, easy climb, and the kids could do it. But there's all kinds of hiking trails through the Franklin Mountains, and it's a really, really beautiful, majestic sort of. I look out my window and there are the mountains right there. So on the other side of the mountains, that's the west side. So that's pretty much all of the areas um, that I think a lot of the folks live in that commute to Fort Bliss, unless you live on Fort Bliss.
Hmm. Yeah. So I've heard a lot about the mountains, like that area. It seems like most of the people that we talk to, especially when gathering our information, we're living kind of either on either side of the mountain range.
Yes.
What are the different? Is the sprawl happening on the northeast? Am I correct in that?
Yeah, so I live in the Northeast, and I
Okay.
think, depending on who you talk to, I think it really depends on your preference and on what part of Fort Bliss your spouse will be working.
True.
Mine tends to work on the main part of Fort Bliss, so the commute down 54
Mm-hmm.
was pretty easy. I think he can get there in about 15 minutes.
Oh, wow.
Um, so some people decide to live on the west side. There's a lot of newer communities on the west side over the mountain range, and Trans Mountain Pass goes right through the mountains and is a quick commute. I will say that when the weather isn't so good here, we
Mm-hmm.
have quite a bit of wind during the windy season. It can slow the commute down, but overall, I've heard that the commuting times from the west side are pretty good as well. And then, depending on where your service member is working on Fort Bliss, it might make sense for him or her for you to look at living on the east side if you're
Mm-hmm.
not living on post. So it really all depends on where you're oriented on Fort Bliss, and what makes the most sense for your commute times.
Yeah, it looks like you have tons of options, which is really kind of fun. Yeah.
You really do. You really do. I've heard mixed reviews about pricing, and again, depending on if you're buying or you're renting or all of
Mhm.
that, it, you're going to have to look at your budget, your BAH, kind of figure out what makes sense for your family, and then factor in the commute time, gas, and all of that, and I think you'll arrive at the right formula.
How do you feel about the schools? I don't know. I can't remember how old your kiddos are, but what
Yeah.
influenced well, let me back up. What influenced your decision to live in the Northeast? What were your main factors that you were considering?
So I think that obviously schools were number one. Number two was commute time for my husband, and then just quick access to the installation because unfortunately we didn't get on post housing. So that wasn't even an option. We knew that
Yeah.
coming here, it was going to be like a year wait, and we didn't want to have to worry about the, jumping from house to house because we've done that before and that's no
Right.
fun.
Right.
So we just decided when we were coming here that we were going to rent a house. We decided that we didn't want to purchase at this time. And I also heard really good things about a couple of the schools in the Northeast. And so we did kind of focus our housing search in the Northeast. The West Side has some great schools as well. And the East Side has some strong schools as well. So you're going to find something no matter where you go.
That's
I
great.
think it makes sense to look at kind of the whole picture.
Yeah, for sure. For sure. Okay, cool. Let's talk about amenities. So I always ask, how far is Target? That seems to always be an
Yes.
anchor for us.
Yes. So I was so excited when we got Fort Bliss and I learned that it is a true city. It is a real city,
Yeah.
and there are, I think, two or three Targets here.
Sweet.
There's one on the kind of on the east side of the city. There's one on the west side of the city. And fortunately, there's not one in the northeast. So I am not going to it every week.
Right. Well, yeah, that could
Yeah.
be a good thing. We're talking finances in a minute, so that actually could be that could be a tip. Oh
Yes.
man. And like
So that's a budget tip
baseball, you
right
guys have
there.
pro sports teams and like yeah, it sounds like a really fun place, like with tons to explore.
Sure do. We have the Rhinos, which is hockey. I know hockey in the desert,
Fun. Okay.
but there's a professional hockey team here. Baseball, the Chihuahuas
Yep.
baseball team, and then I think they even have the Locomotives, which is a soccer team.
Oh,
Soccer is
very
huge.
cool. Huh.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay, I could see that. Very, very
Yep.
cool. What are some of like your favorite weekend things to do?
So we love to go to the movies, and there's lots of entertainment venues here. There's the movies, there's museums, but then another thing that we really enjoy are the hiking trails. So
Yeah.
we like to get out, especially when it's not too hot.
Mm,
Usually in the summer, it can get 100, 105 degrees here. So if you're going to go out and enjoy the beauty of the area, you want to go early in the morning or kind of later in the day. And we usually hit it up in the morning.
smart.
But the hiking trails for sure. We're also really involved in the Cub Scouts, and so we've kind of learned about some of the fun camp out places
Yeah.
and campsites in the area. So being in this part of Texas, you're close to New Mexico as well, and New Mexico has a lot of beauty to really discover, and we haven't even dove into that completely. So I'm
Awesome.
excited to do that.
And you guys I know you get a ton of sunshine. Like, not only is it hot, but
Yes.
it's, yeah, isn't it? And El Paso's the Sun City, right? Isn't it kind of
It is
nicknamed
called the
that?
Sun.
Yeah.
Absolutely, it is called the Sun City. I would say probably 350 days out of 365 days, it
Yeah.
is sunny. Yeah,
That's
no, we do
crazy.
get some rain. There is a rainy season. I want to
Mm.
say it's in July timeframe, but that's pretty much it. Other than that, we do get a lot of sun. Even the winters are really temperate here.
Oh, that's,
Um, we were out riding bikes on Christmas.
oh. Oh, do you miss seasons though? You're from the East Coast. Yeah.
I do a lot.
Yeah.
I miss green. I think
Green.
one of the things that I didn't know, I mean, it makes sense, but I just didn't think about it when we moved here, that there really isn't natural green. It's a
Right.
lot of brown
Right.
because of the desert sort of
Mm-hmm.
area. There's lots of brush, but when you look at the mountains, you're not looking at mountains with trees and lush and green. They are, rocks and dirt,
Yeah.
and
And you can
it's a
see them because they're not all covered in trees. Like, it's not just
ab-
kind of a shape. It's like you see
right.
the actual, yeah, that's
Yes.
crazy.
Yeah, you see like every divot and muscle, of the
Oh, I love
mountain.
that. And they just kind
Yeah,
of rise up out of the ground instead of it
do.
being like a gradual. Yeah, I always thought that was crazy. So we had a
Yeah.
chat earlier this week about Fort Huachuca, and it was kind of the
Mm,
same thing. So apparently I'm doing like a Southwest theme this week.
yeah.
Yeah, it's very arid and like, but less lawn maintenance, right? Like, do you guys have rockscapes and
We do, but we unfortunately are in a house that does try to have a
oh,
backyard.
dog grass?
So yeah, the front yard is all rockscape, and a lot of the houses here do that instead of green, or they have turf. They'll put in the fake turf,
Oh,
which is
okay.
a lot better
Huh.
than grass, just because you have to water it constantly.
Yeah, yeah, I can imagine that being a problem as far as sustainability goes too.
For sure.
Um, Is there anything that you wish you had known before you had gotten there?
Well, I think just if someone had prepared me a little bit more for the landscape.
Yeah.
It took at first I was like, "Oh my gosh, this is kind of crazy."
Yeah.
It's very brown and it took me a while to become, I think, accustomed to not seeing as much green.
Oh,
But obviously now, and when we go back east, it's like, "Oh, green,
right.
it's so beautiful." The other thing that's kind of interesting to me is that, and I think it has a lot to do with the heat here, but in prior installations, we kind of toss the kids outside and all the neighborhood kids would all get together and play. And here, I think they tend to do a lot of that more inside because it does get hot. There's not as
Mm,
much of the kind of outdoor play. They have more parks here in the neighborhood. So we have a park that we'll go to, and there'll be kids there, and they kind of congregate there. But it's a little bit different than when we've lived either on installations or in developments, in
yeah,
neighborhoods where the kids kind of all congregate outside front of the houses. I think it's just a little bit different in that regard.
I could see that for sure. And then plus you're not on base. So I think the security factor is something to consider
Yeah.
there too. Like the one time I lived on base, it was like that. It was just kind of like free range kids everywhere. And then now that we no longer live in a
Yeah.
community like that, it's like, I need to see where you're at.
Yeah. Yeah.
I could see that.
Exactly.
And the heat. Oh gosh.
But oddly enough, so far I will say, and I've read too quite a bit when we were moving here about the stats about El Paso, and it is a relatively safe city,
Yeah.
like low crime rate.
Oh, that's awesome.
Which was really encouraging because, going to a new place, you don't quite know a whole lot about the
Yeah.
background, and the crime rates of the area. And I was worried about it being a large city. Um, and Juarez at times in its history hasn't had the best, reputation.
Yeah.
But I will say that El Paso has been quite safe, and we've been really, really pleasantly surprised by that.
Yeah, we hear that a lot, honestly. I've heard that time and time again with all of the research that we've done for the installation guides, because so many places get a bad reputation just because there's a hesitancy, there's an apprehension about going somewhere new, and then you pick one little thing to like kind of cling to as like the scary thing. And I've done it personally. Like
Sure.
I'm not moving to Alaska. There's too much snow. That's silly. Go to Alaska, experience Alaska. You know what I mean? But you can just kind of grab on to whatever your insecurity might be. So if it's
Yes.
something that's new or different, you can kind of interpret that in whatever way and find the negative things in the Facebook comment threads and hang on to that and really set yourself up for failure, if you ask me, because then you're just kind of, your mindset sucks going into it.
Yeah,
So
absolutely.
yeah, so we hear that a lot, and I'm really glad to hear that it's actually scientifically and data
Oh
wise
yeah.
otherwise.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
not actually the case.
Absolutely.
It is what you make it.
Absolutely.
Awesome. Okay, so do you have any hidden gems? What are some places that you wish you had found like from day one instead of, however long it took you to discover them?
Well, I'm trying to think. I know that one of the restaurants we love, Cattleman's, is one you have to visit
I've
when you're
heard of
here.
that. Okay.
Mhm.
Okay.
Mhm. It's not really hidden. I think it is pretty out
Yeah,
there. But we didn't go right away. We waited a while to go, and I kind of wished we had gone sooner.
because you
I'm
would
not a
go
big
more often or just to go ahead.
Yeah, yeah.
Really?
Well, because it's also an experience. Like it's an actual working ranch, and so you can go see the animals, and they have a fun playground, and then you can go, obviously to the restaurant. And it's not just steak, because I'm not a big steak eater.
Mm,
My husband loves it, but I'm not a big steak eater. But they have wonderful chicken bakes and all kinds of sides. It's a really really fun experience, and then dining experience for sure.
that's so cool.
I also really love Ellen J's for Mexican food. I mean, they have great Mexican food here.
Say it again.
So
L.
Ellen J's,
Spell it for me.
Ellen J's, L
Ellen J's. I got it.
and
Okay.
J's. Yeah.
Cool. I'm gonna try to throw these links in there so because I always forget to go back and put them in, you guys. So if you ever want to call me out on that, you're welcome to. But I always forget, so we're gonna throw them in here right now.
Yeah.
Um.
And then there's just all kinds of fun stuff to do. Like they have the water park here, Wet and Wild, and they have an amusement park here as well. So pretty much, if you have an inkling to do something,
mm, you
this
can
city
find
is
it.
large enough that it has it.
That's awesome.
Yeah,
That's really great to know. So it's not a matter of like not having it available. It's just a matter of getting out and going to it. That's
that's
cool.
right.
Do you have any
That's right.
like who has like season passes to things? Do you have annual memberships to anything? Like we do museums and stuff here.
Yeah, we haven't yet, but I know Wet and Wild has a really good promotion. And depending on where you go, they usually offer a military discount
I'm
too. So
sure.
definitely ask for those military discounts to to get that within your budget. I'm trying to think what else. Oh, we really enjoy going to the Chihuahuas games.
Yeah,
You know,
I've
we
heard
do
such
that.
good things about that little park. It sounds
So
so cute.
much
Yeah.
fun, and it even has like its own version of the Green Monster because I'm from Boston, with
Oh,
Fenway
is
Park.
it a Boston
It's
team?
No, it's
Oh,
not, but I mean, it has like it's a real, stadium.
cool.
Yeah,
Oh,
in the
that's so
middle
cool.
of the city, in the middle of downtown, which
That's
is
so
kind of
cool.
you
Yeah.
don't expect to see a full state, right in the middle of downtown, but
Yeah.
it's there. UTEP, University of Texas El Paso, is the one of the large universities here, and they also have a large stadium where they have football and different venues that kind of travel through, and that's a really fun place to check out as well. And they have a lot of arts and cultural events that go on year round.
Oh, see, anytime you have schools, it kind of like brings the next level to
It does.
all kinds of
It
stuff,
does.
cultural
It does.
offerings, opportunities. Oh, it's so cool. So yeah, take advantage of that, you guys. It sounds awesome. I mean, I've heard great things. Again, it's all in your attitude, your mindset
Yep.
going into it. You're going to get out what you put in. So find yourself a nice community that your family will fit well into, that kind of meets all of your needs and your touch points, and then go from there and get out of your house, go explore, and that's kind of the key.
Absolutely.
And if you're
Absolutely.
in the midst of a PCS right now, we're with you. We're praying for you. Good
Oh my
luck.
gosh. Yes.
So hot.
Yes. And just because I'm a military spouse that also works, I will say there are lots of opportunities and resources out there for military
Yeah.
spouses that are in the midst of
Yep.
PCSing and are, trying to move their careers with them.
Okay,
So,
so let's talk. Yeah, because we were going to
okay.
transition into that. Let's. So you've worked extensively in the field, so mainly predominantly marketing communications, but then you've kind of focused in on the financial world and arena. So we were going to chat about some of your tips for
Sure.
keeping PCS expenses under control, and it's really hard
Yeah.
to do. And there's so many things that sneak up on you and just kind of happen.
Absolutely.
So what are some ways? What are some of the best ways to prepare for that and
Yeah.
mitigate that?
Yeah. Yeah, so I'll talk a little bit about that from the perspective of not just a military spouse, but I'm also an accredited financial counselor.
Mm-hmm.
And the first thing I would say is go into the PCS with a true budget.
Mm,
If you don't have a budget already, to create a budget, just get a snapshot of what your expenses are, your income, and how those are weighing out, if they're balancing. Go before going into the PCS move, if they're not balancing out and you're ending up in the red, it might be time to kind of cut back a bit and to trim
mm-hmm.
the fat to get ready for that PCS move so that you can put some of that money, some extra money aside. Because if there's anything I've learned from going through 10 PCS moves is that they are expensive.
Yeah. How much do you recommend? Like, what do you think? Is there any sort of like standard amount?
Yeah. Well, I think anything helps, even if
Mm,
it's a few $100s. But generally speaking, you wanna try to have set aside 3 to 6 months in an emergency fund for transitions. I like to personally
mm.
have 1,000 to get
Okay.
started.
Yeah.
You know, and it's not always easy to save that. That's why the sooner you can get started on that, the better. But even if you have 500 in a transition account to get ready for a PCS move, that can help you come up with the initial money to pay for things like deposits. If you're renting a
Yep.
house and you're not living on post, because on post you don't generally have to come up with first and last month's rent. Whereas if you live off post, I have to do that. Of course, purchasing a home is a totally separate beast. You're going to
Mm-hmm.
want quite a bit more saved for any of the oopses that come up with home ownership. But speaking just about renting, you want to be able to have that money set aside for first and last month's rent, and then just making the house a home.
Yeah.
I mean, I every time I move, I look around, I'm like, all right, these curtains do not work.
The freaking curtains, man. There's just why do windows even need curtains? Because that's like the bane of
or
my existence.
yeah. Or, I they've completely beaten up our furniture, and
Yeah.
one of our bookshelves just did not survive this last
Mm-hmm.
time. And it was going to take a while to get the reimbursement, going
Yeah.
through that process to get the money back. And in the meantime, I didn't want my books all over the floor. So, I at least had the money. It wasn't urgent, but I had the money set aside to go and replace that furniture in the interim. But other things like utilities, it can be costly to set up utilities sometimes depending on the situation.
Yeah.
Utilities company may ask for
Yeah.
a deposit
Yep. A
for
lot of
that
times they
sort
do
of
because
thing.
you're new. They don't know you. You don't have any sort of
Yeah,
history of usage with them. So I
correct.
know it was crazy when I moved back to Fort Bragg. We'd been gone for 3 years, but I still had an account with that. Like they still had a record of me. And
Yeah.
we're like, oh, okay, cool. We'll waive it for you. And so if they tell you there's a deposit, ask them what the criteria is for waiving it because sometimes they
Yes.
can, which can be helpful. But then you're going to have this overlap, right? Because the place you just left is still holding your deposit. And then you've got to account for that. And because those expenses add up so
Absolutely.
fast. Yeah, that's a great point.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And depending on where you're going, you may need a totally new wardrobe. When we moved from from Fort Rucker, Alabama to Fort Drum, New York, I mean, it
Oh
was,
my
whoo,
God.
whoa,
Oh, yeah.
totally different,
Yeah.
And then even just moving from Fort Riley to Fort Bliss, the summers are hot at Fort Riley, but we don't get the cold here. So I needed to change up our wardrobe, and that costs money to do
Yeah.
that sort of thing. So having that money set aside to be able to do that quickly and not have it be a real stressor, it
Right.
can make all the difference with a PCS.
Totally can. And you brought up one other thing, and this isn't something to like bank on per se, pun included or intended. But when our stuff gets messed up, you guys can fill out the claims forms. Like,
What was
please
that?
claim your damages. Like when your
Oh
stuff
yeah.
gets messed up, I know some people get like overwhelmed and just say, "Oh,
Hmm.
forget it, whatever. We just can't have nice things," that kind of thing. I'm the biggest proponent of filling out the damage and claim
That's
form
right.
to the letter. Like if you can be the more organized you are on the front end, the better, right? And this goes for everything about a PCS. The more organized you can be to begin with, the better. So if you're documenting and contesting some of they put these little, if you haven't PCS before, get ready. You get this whole long nasty sheet and they put these little codes by everything that they pack. And it'll say scuffed or damaged or stretched.
Yeah.
They will literally sometimes just put every code in the book just because they don't want to bother on the back end. And if you sign your name to that, you're agreeing to the state of the condition of that furniture. So on the back end, you don't really have a foot to stand on, right? So anyway, point being, claim all your stuff, you guys. And
Hmm.
if it's not replaceable, claim it at full replacement value. They're going to come back and offer you, if they do, a fraction of what you're claiming. So be
Ouch.
sure you're kind of padding it enough, not fairly. Don't be untruthful, but pad it enough to where you've got some room to negotiate. And don't take the first offer. Push back. Because that stuff matters and that stuff adds up, especially if you're moving back to back to back to back. Like you can literally incur tens of thousands of dollars in just damages. You don't have to swallow that. So anyway, off my soapbox. Fill out the
Yep.
damage claims forms. It holds them accountable.
Yes.
That's their bottom line.
Yes. Take
They
pictures.
and take
Take
all the
pictures
pictures. Oh
too.
my god. I have
Before they come in and they
Yep.
start packing things up, take pictures of all of your valuable things, even the furniture. I would say
Yep.
take pictures of it.
Oh my god,
Um,
yes.
yeah.
High
And
value
save the
stuff.
receipts.
Save your receipts.
Yeah.
Yep. Yeah. Again, get organized beforehand because the day of is chaos. That is not the day to take pictures.
That's true. That is so true. It
Yeah.
is it is crazy.
Yeah. And just take your time on the back end going through your stuff. Really inspect
Yeah.
your stuff. And then take extra pictures there too. So it's a pain. But
Yeah.
while you're waiting for a new job because you just had to leave the job you left,
Right.
you've got a little time
That's
on your hands.
right. That's right. You've got time.
So let's talk about that, Alicia. I'd love to hear your
Yeah.
insights on being an entrepreneur and an employee. I know you've done both. What's been your experience with moving, and how has that impacted your kind of
Oh
professional
yeah.
career?
Huge, huge. So for quite a while, I'd say for the first, 10 to 15 years of my career, I was going into an office to work. And I was really fortunate in finding meaningful work opportunities wherever we PCSed. So, had a really good job when we were at Fort Bragg, North Carolina, had another great experience when we were at Fort Drum. It was around the time that I was at Fort Rucker. where the job market just wasn't that great, and I was also home with the little ones at that point, that I decided I wanted to start thinking about working from home and to find a way to use my skills to be a little bit more of an entrepreneur and to at least have that to fall back on.
Mm-hmm.
Because depending on where you're stationed, the job markets are just so different,
Mm-hmm.
and you're military spouses know you are not guaranteed a job when you PCS. So I started doing a little bit of volunteer work for the American Red Cross at that point in the
Mm-hmm.
area near Fort Rucker, Alabama, and started consulting for them, writing press releases and doing some of their events. And then that actually very quickly turned into paid work. And this was like 12 years ago, so it's been a while now. But I took that experience with me and just kind of kept some small projects on the back burner as I had other regular employment opportunities that I was working on. And then recently decided that it was a good time, just because of a lot of personal factors in my life. It was a good time to look at some consulting opportunities and to go back into being my own boss, per se,
Mm-hmm.
an independent consultant for a period of time. And I'm doing that right now, which is a lot of fun, and it gives you some flexibility, and it helps you to kind of spread your wings and to try out some different things that maybe you haven't done in a while or haven't done before. So I guess I would say go into your military spouse career with an open mind. Cast that net wide.
Mm-hmm.
Um, have in mind like what you want to do, and I think that is totally fine to say, nope, I would really like to do this.
Right.
But to also be open-minded that sometimes opportunities don't arrive in the perfect package that you might think, and they end up being these really cool opportunities.
Right. Yeah. I love how you were able to kind of get your foot in volunteering somewhere and using your strengths.
Yeah.
So when you're coming in and you're volunteering, you can kind of do that, right? Like you can say, this is what I'm
Yes.
good at. So this is what I'm going to do
Yes.
because then you're not
That's
paying
right.
me. So
That's
you
right.
guys don't have
That's
to just
right.
be kind of corralled into something that you're not interested in. If you're volunteering, you need to be able to be getting something, even if it's not financially. You need to be getting
Yep.
something out of it. Experience,
Yep.
network, just being able to breathe out your passion, whatever it is. And so then you're very close at hand when there is a need for an
Mhm.
employee or when an opening kind of happens. So you've already positioned yourself in that way, but you've also then expanded your network, which is crucial. I think that is one of our biggest strengths that we have. That is kind of an underestimated strength when it comes to just who we are. So I've even had some random freelance opportunities just because people know me in this military spouse space, right? To include the one that you and I worked on. Like it's just kind of
Mhm.
like that was just me working my network and kind of being
Yep.
available. And so now you as a consultant, which I think is brilliant, by the way, you're able to then you're able to put all of this experience, this knowledge, this wisdom that you've accrued
Yep.
over a career. I mean, as hodgepodge as we may think they all are, they're really not.
Yep.
You're accruing
Yep.
knowledge every step of the way. And now
Yep.
you're able to share that, those experiences with different companies and organizations. And, whether it's whatever realm your expertise lies in is important. Because think about how many companies can hire employees with the depth of experiences that we have, you
Yeah, you
know?
bring up a really good point, a huge point. You think about all of the environments that we kind of are plunked into, and how quickly military spouses have to pick up and learn things. And I don't think that I mean, there could be, but I just don't think that there are a lot of, uh, there's a lot of folks on the civilian side that maybe could do that. Or, I may be a little biased,
I
but,
think we're biased, but yeah, but it's true.
you know,
But it really is. I mean, you're just your average, especially in some, and you mentioned this earlier, in some of the smaller communities specifically, like depending on what your branch is and what your service member's job entails, you could be co-located near big, huge cities. So we may not be that unique in DC, right? But
right,
in
right.
El Paso, you
Hmm.
might be a little more unique, or especially like Fort Rucker, like some of the smaller
Yeah.
areas. Yeah, and but in doing that too, though, and in owning your strengths, you guys own your strengths. These are all assets. Okay, a lot of times people think of being military spouse and having the hodgepodge resume as a liability. You go ahead and internalize the fact that those are strengths that you can use to your advantage and that any employer is lucky to have. Once you kind of embody that, then you're able to transmit that back out during an interview, convince people to hire you, which has kind of been my That's my play. I'm like, you just need to hire me. And here's why. But like by owning that, we're going to be able to start changing and shifting the way we're viewed on a larger scale, because people are going to be
Absolutely.
like, ooh, I want a military spouse because she's been everywhere,
That's right.
or he's been everywhere, versus, oh, I don't want to hire them because they're just going to leave. You see what I mean? It's kind of like flipping the mindset. So
Yep. Yep.
thank you for being an
Absolutely.
ambassador for that.
Oh, absolutely. And I just think that there are so many different experiences that military spouses have, and we learn quickly, and we can, package that, learn to be someone who can kind of, market
Mm-hmm.
yourself.
Yep.
And what your brand is.
Yep.
And I think if you can pull that together and take some time to really think about that, they'd be crazy not to hire a
I
military
know.
spouse, in my
I
opinion.
know. It's tough though, y'all. We know it's tough getting,
Yep.
knocked down every single move, but
Yep.
we're here for you. Let's crowdsource it. Like if you guys are having issues or a struggle, because I know right now, if you're watching this now, we love you. Thanks for tuning in. If you catch this later, it's probably because you're driving, right? Or you're in the U-Haul, or you're monitoring movers right now, and that's totally cool too. So catch it later. But throw in the comments like what are your struggles? What are you struggling with? And we can kind of pool resources. We have tons of partner organizations that Millie works with and that Alicia is aware of that we could point you guys to if this is something that you want to start kind of paying more attention to and making a focus at your next duty station. So we're happy to help.
Absolutely.
And we're here for you. Cool. Alicia, do you have any
Awesome.
closing words? Any kind of like affirmations or sighs of relief of if someone's headed to Fort Bliss or maybe concerned about anything else that we've talked about, finances or employment?
Sure, sure. Speaking of resumes, if you're concerned about your resume being a hodgepodge, don't forget to list your volunteer experiences
Yes.
as real opportunities,
Yep.
because no doubt you are treating that volunteer experience like it's your job.
Mm-hmm.
So put it down as your job. That is completely fine. If you have anxiety, or you're concerned about moving to a new location, really reach out to your military network, your military spouse network, to crowdsource and to find out who's been there, so that it doesn't feel quite so foreign,
Mm.
when you get there. Um, and I try whenever we move, and it does get tiring after 15 years of doing it. I have to admit, I'm a little pooped right now, but I do try to think about, you know, pull the best from every
Mm-hmm.
experience, because there's really good experiences from all of these adventures we go on, and learn from it, and try to give back to those that are just starting the journey.
Oh, that's a great point. Yeah, giving back. I think those of us on the back end, it's kind of hard to see because we're focused on like the end goal, the horizon, the 4 years left,
Yep.
whatever. But we still have a calling, so to speak,
Yes.
to give back. So here we are.
Yes,
Okay.
that's right.
Thank you, Alicia. I really appreciate your time and all your insights. This was fantastic. And hopefully we'll get to meet in real life one of these days. What do you think?
Sounds good. Thanks again. It's been a pleasure. Thank you for having me.
Thanks so much. All right, everybody, that'll wrap us up for today. What a cool conversation with Alecia Blair. We learned about Fort Bliss and also had all kinds of great things to share about employment and finances and making sure that you are prepared for your PCS and doing it well. So if you have questions about today's chat, please throw them in the comments. We will both be kind of monitoring and watching and checking in to circle back and say hi to you guys and to answer any questions you may have. If you've been to Fort Bliss, let us know that too. Throw your hidden gems in the comments so that we can kind of crowdsource that as well. So, okay, everyone, until next time, have an awesome week.